Welcome to Mining Over Canada. Join the Canadian Securities Exchange and our partners in a first-hand look into our country's vast mining landscape.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. This is Mining Over Canada, and this week we're featuring the Northern Territories. Today I am talking to Honorable Ranj Pillai. Ranj is actually wears a couple of different hats. So Mr. Pillai was appointed to the Executive Council of the Yukon in December of 2016, wears a number of different hats. He's currently the Deputy Premier, Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources, Minister of Economic Development, and also the Minister responsible for the Yukon Development Corporation and the Yukon Energy Corporation. Ranj, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Mining Over Canada. How are you?
Great, Anil. Thank you. Greetings from the Yukon. I'm here on the traditional territory of the Kwalindun First Nation and the Tonquetchin Council. Excited to share, the Yukon story with you and tell you about, some pretty exciting stuff that's happening up here right now.
I'm really looking forward to it. And like I mentioned earlier, we're glad that we can get your perspective on this as well. So why don't we begin by you talking to our audience about your role as the Deputy Premier, as well as some of the other hats that you wear?
Yeah, appreciate that. So I took on this role in late 2016. Was appointed by the Premier to take on a number of different roles, as you touched on. I guess what's important to those watching, our interview today is really about the fact that it was important that we took economic development. We also paralleled that with energy, mines, resources, and also the energy portfolio. So really, putting all the tools together that are needed to ensure you can drive an economy, and specifically ensuring that we put a big focus on the mining sector, which is so important to the Yukon.
Let's talk a little bit about the history of mining in the Yukon. There's we might have an audience that probably only knows about the Yukon through stories they might have heard about the gold rush. So why don't I let you talk to us a little bit about the role of Yukon in the mining space when it comes to historical?
Yeah, over 100-year history. It goes really back to 1896 and the discovery in Bonanza Creek, and of course that led to the Klondike Gold Rush. As well, we're seeing new activity in the Keno Silver District, and has a long history of being one of the richest silver areas in the world, and a really extensive history there as well. So, Yukoners have been around mining for a long time. They understand mining, and really, I guess the key to that is we've had this period of time where this ecosystem has been built in the Yukon, right from the prospectors that are going out there with a pack on their back, and right to the most innovative prospecting that you can see, into junior mining companies, then of course right through to production. So all the pieces really that are needed are here, and that's again because we've got this extremely long history of both gold mining, silver mining, and now a lot of different diverse activities that are happening within the sector.
And how would you say that this sector has evolved? Obviously not in the last 100 years, because there's been a lot of upside in technology that's been used, but let's say in the last 10, 20 years. Can you maybe give us a little update on that?
Yeah, I think, when I think about the sector now, sort of the last big boom that happened in the sector. Let's go back to 2011, when there was a lot of exploration. What we saw in the Yukon at that particular point was a lot of investment, like significant investment on the exploration side, but not building on that to get to production. And so now I think what we're seeing is a true pipeline, where we're now getting, we've got 2 operating mines. We have a third one that's just coming online. We'll have 3 in great positions here. And then, of course, we just had some favorable news for one of our companies. The environmental assessment process is pretty near completed for BMC, which is the Kutzakaya project. The company is called BMC. They have a leadership team with a lot of history across the world of building mines. So now we're seeing, these new projects coming on. So I think that's important. And then I would say that, the engagement with Indigenous partners is changed in the last, even in our time in office. The first thing I did was sign an agreement with 11 self-governing First Nations in the Yukon. There's 14 First Nations, but 11 self-governing. They have their own governance structure, and it's what we call in Canada a modern treaty. And essentially what is played out is we've made a commitment to them to work hand in hand. And I think for anybody in the space, having the partnership and support of Indigenous governments is key to moving projects to where they need to be, to the right place. And you get it done in the right way, and then and just you get it done. I guess that's really the key to it.
Yeah, you echo a lot of the same sentiments. I mean, part of this initiative to highlight the Northern Territories, I've spoken with the team from Invest Yukon. I spoke with Peter Johnston, who's the Grand Chief of the Yukon Council of First Nations. And a lot of you guys are echoing the same sentiment. So it's great to see that everybody's very like-minded when it comes to that. And obviously that's what's leading to the success you guys are having.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important. It's we've undertaken a process right now, which is called the Mineral Development Strategy, and we brought in a third-party panel of former Deputy Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources with a great track record in the space, one of the top entrepreneurs in the space as well, and a former First Nations chief who's been a great leader as well in the resource sector. And those three individuals have come together and gone out and had conversations across the Yukon, and they've also practiced this across Canada, and they're now coming together with their first report. It's a What You Heard report, and that's going to move into the spring, where we're going to have some recommendations that are going to come from all Yukon people. It's going to come from the mining sector on things we can improve, but it's also there's going to be some great advice from First Nations about how we can even work together in a more comprehensive way. So we know here that it is the key to ensuring that you have a sustainable and vibrant mineral sector. There's only one way, and that's doing it together.
Of course. And in general, it seems like the general population of Yukon is very supportive when it comes to the mining space. What could you explain what makes them so bullish and be supportive? Obviously the history is a big part that plays into this, but maybe you can touch on a few points there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. I think the history, so people are more comfortable with it. What tends to happen throughout this country, we have a large portion of the population in Canada that's very close to the Canadian-US border, mostly in urban centers. A lot of those individuals have been really removed from this industry. They might have had parents or grandparents that grew up in rural parts of Canada and were part of these industries. They're of course so important to our country over the years, but now people are just not as aware. And so the difference in the Yukon is people can see the benefits of an industry like this. They know if it's done properly in an environmentally responsible way, it's a great industry. And what you see from that is companies that really step up from a corporate social responsibility standpoint, giving to our communities, building charities, supporting our students to have better successful outcomes in the education system. It goes on and on. As well, we're in a position right now. There's two regions in this country, provinces or territories, and it's Nunavut and the Yukon right now that are projecting positive GDP growth in the middle of a pandemic. And it goes without saying, if it wasn't for the mineral sector, we wouldn't be there. Tourism, which is important in the Yukon, and it's been a great pillar of our economy. We know there's been significant constriction and pressure, but what we've seen is because the commodity price is moving in that favorable direction, as well as the delta between currency as well between Canada and the U.S. We've seen a situation where more investment coming in. Our placer mining industry has done extremely well this summer, and the mining sector, when I talk about that in the port side, has done really well. So people know, the businesses wouldn't be open. The service sector around the industry wouldn't be as vibrant as it is. It affects everything for us. Hotels that wouldn't have had, don't have tourists in them, but are in a situation where they have miners in them. So all of those things, I think lead in the Yukon to a common sense approach around how important this industry is, not just for the Yukon, but for the country.
Yeah. So obviously there's been some effects that you guys and your communities have felt due to COVID. In the pandemic, we're all in. So how have you guys dealt with these issues, or have you had to deal with these issues out there?
Yeah, of course, like every jurisdiction, we've worked really closely with Chief Medical Officer of Health on the issue. Our industry players have done really well. I mean, it's frustrating for every industry to have to, figure out how to move through these protocols. Of course, it's important because we're trying to keep people safe. And first, what we saw, we moved quickly as placer miners and explorers were coming into the territory, or companies that were trying to staff up if they didn't have Yukon employees. And in that particular case, we just made sure that we were working really hand in hand with the companies to have proper protocols in place so they could keep themselves safe, our community safe, and continue to do their work. So on the exploration side, we were a little bit slow starting in the spring, but now we're seeing an extension of our normal season because of the capital that's coming into the space. On the same side, we on our producing projects, we just all worked together. They were really respectful. They understand how important it is. The producing mines that we have are close to small communities. They know that what the risk is for communities of that size if there's a spread. So they've done a really good job of, making sure that they've had to do some pretty significant stuff with their shifting, and a lot of the employees were on long schedules, but they've done what it has, what it took to ensure people are safe. So we, to date, and we hope that's the case. We haven't had any outbreak or infection that has anything to do with the sector, the mineral sector. We've had, really a minimal amount of cases in the Yukon overall, but they've done a really good job. And I think that again just builds confidence for the sector when people know they're really looking out for the communities as well as their own employees. And so it's so far so good.
So far so good, and we hope it stays that way for you guys in your communities to help flourish. Now, you mentioned placer mining a couple of times. Do you want to maybe just let our audience know what is considered as placer mining? There might be some people that don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, there's a long history with placer mining. It's usually small operations that are really just using, in many cases, water to sift through, sift through the ground and being able to go through a process where they can extract gold from that. I mean, I would say, we people probably see Gold Rush on TV. That, of course, is a sensationalized version of what happens. I think if you talk to any placer miners here, they would say it's not quite that dramatic, but it's a it's got a long history. And this year we're probably looking at, we'll see numbers over the next month, but over the last couple of years, it's been about 70,000, 75,000 ounces of gold being recovered. So still significant, probably that industry will put, probably $250 million into our economy. So when you have communities like Dawson City, that, you have populations, under 2,000 people, you can imagine the economic impact. And so it's been, again, really important this year that we've seen a lot of long-term families, a lot of, there's people in that industry in the Yukon that are, I think, fifth generation, if not greater, in that sector. Family-run businesses, and so they're really interwoven within our communities. All those miners, it's long history.
It's essentially in their blood.
Absolutely.
When we talk about placer miners and that sort of aspect, I've read that placer miners have to report any fossil finds. Yeah, because they do come across them quite often, and there is a chief paleontologist that has been appointed. Can you talk about how mining is helping archaeology?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what we've seen in especially in the area outside of Dawson City is mammoth tusks that would be recovered on site, and so there absolutely is an obligation for the miners to report that. And then they work quite closely with our heritage and culture branch on that particular department on those finds. So yeah, I mean, we've had absolutely there because of that industry. we've seen, a lot of pretty significant fines that we wouldn't have had. And I mean, they're always, very proud to be good corporate citizens and to work with our departments to make sure that we have those items recovered, and that we can do the research and study that we need to do to understand, the long, really interesting history of the Yukon.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that that comes out by means of mining. So we've talked a lot about the positives. I want to switch topics a little bit, and let's talk about some of the challenges that are being faced, not just from the corporate side there in Yukon, but also from the community side. Are you able to talk about how your team is working through these challenges and what they might be?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, if I don't believe there's a mining sector from province to province, territory to territory, state to state, where industry wouldn't be looking to come up with better ways to reduce duplication within regulatory processes. People want to make sure things are done appropriately, that the processes are accountable, but at the same time, trying to, as the interface between government and industry, to make those things as smooth as possible and reduce, again, duplication. So the mineral development strategy that I touched on is a key piece to that we've supported. I also have a group of CEOs and vice presidents in the mining sector that advise me. It's called the Yukon Mineral Advisory Board. We've worked with them. They've done some work over the last 6 months, really good work with PricewaterhouseCoopers, again, looking at different tools that we can use to support industry, but again, to make sure that we're not, that a lot of the regulatory work isn't, unnecessarily burdensome. So I think those are really key things. We're really committed to doing that. The water board, which is a key group within the process of getting permitted. Premier has worked very closely with them to ensure that we have, there's an MOU in place that we're constantly doing work through that process. And then overall, I mean, we've really tried to bring people together. I mean, I've been in meetings with the Premier over the last number of months, where we're bringing the chair of the environmental assessment group together and bringing the chair of our water board, pulling them all together and going, look, how can we make sure that we're going to do things right, but we do them in the best fashion to support a vibrant industry. Those are some things I think, from a governance perspective and a regulatory perspective. It's a big place. I mean, we're talking, the Yukon is, it's the size of California. It's a big place that's has a small population. So you're continually, some of the things that we're looking at is, we have about 5,000 kilometers of all-weather roads, but you have to maintain those roads and to work with First Nations governments to look at, new areas of access. Those are things that we continue to do, and we try to do that in a way where we're having very progressive agreements in place with First Nation partners to get that done. We're continually investing in different types of infrastructure. We believe that it is paramount for the Yukon to be able to provide renewable energy sources to the mining sector. All three mines that will be with Alexco coming on, all three of our operating mines will be on our electrical grid, which is about 90 to 92% renewable energy. With as we look to build more projects and bring them online. Why is that important? Well, I mean, we believe in that from the values of Yukoners, that we want to be using clean energy, but also when you start to look at ESG financing models, when I'm sitting with major companies across the world and they're chatting with us, that's what they're asking. They're having a harder time going out and raising the capital they need for their projects if it's in a jurisdiction that doesn't meet those guidelines. So that's one of the things that we have an advantage on compared to the other territories that we have that in place. So we're going to be investing in that. So it's not really a challenge; it's an opportunity. Yeah. But that's another piece for us that's really important. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. We're also we're building what'll end up being about an $85 million fiber line, and it'll be a key telecommunications piece of infrastructure. It'll give redundancy to the entire northern part of this country. A lot of people don't know it. It's a very long, it's a big project. It's going to go from Dawson City all the way really to the Beaufort Sea, and that gives backup. And what we're seeing is in the mining sector, especially with majors, as they move into this territory, and we've significant investments from a number of majors, their perspective on the innovation in mining is, they want that clean power. They want to see great relationships with Indigenous governments. They want to see a government that invests in infrastructure, and they also need to have very advanced telecommunications as we see innovation happening in that sector. So those are things that they're challenges, but at the same time, real opportunities. And they're things that we, again, goes back to your first question, talk about your portfolios. We tried to bundle everything into a place where we can constantly collaborate from department to department and ensure that we're moving all of these things forward.
Ranj, you've mentioned ESG very briefly. Why don't you talk to our audience members about what ESG is? Obviously, in a world where it's a very important part of the growing mining sector when it comes to investment evaluations. How is the Yukon aligned with this very important piece?
Yeah, I think that the values that are the cornerstone of ESG are things that the Yukon government, Yukoners have touted as really important for a long period of time. ESG, when we look at it, we think about the E as the environmental aspects around the sector. Are you doing things right? What's the oversight look like? Are the industry players doing the things that they need to do? And then, of course, on the social side, we think about, what are the impacts to our communities? What are the opportunities? What are those impacts to people that live here? What does that look like? What's the fabric of your community look like as it interfaces with the industry? And then on the governance side, how is your provincial or territorial government? What's the stability look like? And also, what are the relationships? What do they look like with Indigenous governments, and what role do they play? And so for us, we really addressed the principles of ESG back in 2003. We have the Yukon Environmental and Socioeconomic Assessment Act, and that was in place years before ESG was trending in the industry. And the Act basically works to advance projects through an integrated assessment process before we get to the regulatory approval process. And so the process is managed by the Yukon Environmental and Socioeconomic Assessment Board, and they're at arm's length from government. So we promote and support responsible resource development and strong environmental stewardship with cohesive land management and mineral development policies in place. And so we have as well just a very stable regulatory framework that drives the certainty that attracts industry and investors. And so as well, the territory's geopolitical stability enables industry to move forward with exploration and development of Yukon's mineral resources in a very sustainable and knowledge-based manner. So, these are just some, again, we have all those pieces in place. And, as I touched on, it's really important, you have companies that are asking you about where your energy is coming from, or where, or how you work base to ensure they have the right relationship. So we're well poised. I've been, having this conversation with leaders on Bay Street, leaders of the biggest financial institutions in the country. They love what they see in the Yukon. They're all in a position right now. We're seeing this publicly where some of the biggest financial institutions in the country and pensions funds are making outward facing statements about where they will invest and not. And so when you think about in a modern context, what are all the pieces that need to be there? Of course, at the end of the day, you got to have the right rocks. Yeah. So we have those, and we have 2,700 mineral occurrences. There's so much opportunity here. But at the same time, once you find the rocks, you need to make sure that all those other pieces stay together. And that's the work that we've been doing, and I think we have really the right foundation for a modern investor. So,
Ranj, you've touched on a few social issues. I want to talk a little bit about the Indigenous participation in mining. The Yukon obviously has modern treaties. Can you talk to our audience a little bit about this and how you guys have managed to be so proactive?
Yeah, I'm always happy to discuss our perspective as a government when it comes to relationships with our Indigenous governments. It's paramount. It's paramount in the entire country. It's paramount in Yukon to make sure that you have respectful partnerships, partnerships where both sides, all perspectives can be understood, and as well where you can have tough conversations. And so that's really what we've invested in, having those types of relationships. And that started early on in my mandate, which I touched on. I continue to work with a subcommittee of First Nation chiefs through our MOU that we signed early in 2017 in January, just less than 60 days on the job. We had unanimous support by the chiefs to come with us and do that work that had never happened before in the Yukon. And through that, we have a series of subcommittees that work on areas of priority for us as a government, areas of priority from what we're hearing from industry, and areas of priority from our Indigenous governments. So all of those pieces, of course, again, really important, and it gets through the challenging conversations that can happen, and it gives us an ability to come up with solutions. We just quickly, we've got Yukon's biggest gold mine was built in the last year, which is Victoria Gold's Eagle project. In that particular case, a really significant amount, I think up as high as almost 70 to 75% Indigenous participation on the building of the mine. A lot of Indigenous women working on that project. We're really proud about that. The company's done a fantastic job, and now in production, really still a significant amount, I think of over 50% Indigenous workforce. So that's a great, example, I think, of what can happen in a small community and really provide opportunities for great quality of life. Minto, which is it's been producing longer. It's a copper gold project, which is owned by Pembridge Resources now. It's built on a Category A land, it's called. And what that really means is that Selkirk First Nation, which is their partner on that project, Selkirk owns the surface and subsurface rights in these particular areas. And so in this case, you've got a mining company that has the tenure around the claims, but because of that modern treaty, all the royalties go directly back to that First Nation. We collect the royalties and then we transfer them back to the First Nation. So it's a small community, and that yields some really significant revenue for them. And that then becomes money they can put back into their community. So, same thing, Alexco coming online. Again, great relationship with Natchinite Dun, the First Nation in that traditional territory. And they continue to work together. And, there's times where when I go out to meet, it's a meeting with the CEO of the company and the chief coming to meet me together, with shared priorities. Again, and then we touched on earlier, Anil, we talked about BMC, and that's sort of the next project that's moving forward in the Yukon, zinc project. Again, Kutsikaya, named by the Kaska elders in that traditional territory a number of years ago. And again, a company that continues they've put out a number of dollars into scholarships, really forward looking, where they're trying to ensure they can future-proof their workforce at the technical stage. So, providing funds for Kaska youth to go into post-secondary opportunities, so they can come back and not just be on the construction side, but more of the really significant technical opportunities. Yeah. So, we're seeing that from industry. That's what we're encouraging. And again, it's important to be hand in hand and be able to, tell the story together. And that's really what's important here.
Absolutely. Such interesting topics and very important topics that we should be talking about. I think, Ranj, I could probably talk to you for a couple of hours on some of this stuff. Maybe we host you on another podcast that we do for the CSC called #Finance in the future. But you've also got a little bit of experience working with these companies as a director at one point in time. How did you find that experience with some of these companies, specifically the ones that are on the CSC?
You know what, I think, that experience has been key to being able to understand, again, all perspectives in this job. I think what I would say is, especially the CSE, I was happy to have this discussion today, because I know how important the exchange can be. I know the work you folks do, because we need to continue to have that grassroots exploration happening in this country, and also having very effective ways to go out and raise capital. And I think that was my experience. You know, I've worked with companies that have been listed with your exchange, and it was key to moving projects forward. And you know, this country, this sector, and our country has always seen a place where true entrepreneurs can go out and you know, take some risks, do the right things, you know, and bring a group of really talented people together and move projects forward. And if you don't have you know, platforms like the CSE, you can't do it. So again, you know, I think it's really important the work you do. And of course, what people don't understand sometimes is the work you do ends up you know, providing the revenues that you know, pay for their payroll and give them a livelihood, as that money again circulates into our economic ecosystems across the country. So you know, thank you for
Well,
that.
we at the CSE here appreciate that sentiment, and it goes right back to you, your team, and the communities that are involved, because without them, we wouldn't really be able to do this. So what's next? What can people expect in the coming years from the Yukon's mining industry?
Yeah, Anil, I think over the next couple of years, first of all, our mineral development strategy that we touched on is going to be really important. That is, you know, there's going to be some recommendations that come out of that work that I believe is going to be a catalyst for us to become one of the most progressive and modern jurisdictions when it comes to this sector. You know, we understand that to get to a clean tech economy for whether it's in the Yukon or Canada or the globe, we need to continue to focus on those metals that are such a key to that. So we're going to continue to see, I think, investment into the zinc space, the copper space, you know, the platinum base. All of those things are going to continue to draw interest. And then again, you know, we're really focused on the critical metal space. And you know, we have an agreement in place now between Mexico, United States, and Canada. There's geopolitical, you know, concerns on how these particular metals are managed and how they're extracted and who extracts them. So I think we're going to continue to focus on that. So I think, you know, between our strategies, our work on the regulatory regime, our continued focus with Indigenous governments, our investments, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars into roads, energy, telecommunications, our airports, our, you know, international airport, our 27 airdromes and strips, our 5,000 kilometers of all-weather road, all those things that we have in place, I think are going to continue to draw investors. And at the same time, when they go to get their money and the question of ESG comes up, we check all those boxes.
So where would someone go, like any of our audience members who are watching this interview and are curious and want to learn more, where would they go to find some more resources? Yeah,
I think, you know, depending where they want to look and what their interest is, you know, investyukon.ca. I think that, you know, reaching out to our Department of Economic Development, you know, reaching out to the Yukon Chamber of Mines, which is a great organization with a really long history, any of those places, you know, and you know, I always try to, one thing we say about this jurisdiction is, if you want to come and invest, you know, we want to be very available. So, you know, easy to find my email, and you know, ranj.pillai@gov.yk.ca. Send me an email. I'll make sure that it gets to the right place. We want to be very hands-on, and we appreciate all investment that comes into the Yukon.
Great. Ranj, on that note, I want to say thank you so much for your time to participate in the Northern Territories portion of Mining Over Canada. I look forward to talking to you again, hopefully in the future, maybe in the new year, we can have a longer conversation, but we at the CSE appreciate all you guys do. Thanks again to you and your team for taking the time to talk to us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Thanks again, and I look forward to our next conversation.